We are actually in a contest in this country on July the 4th between a party everybody hates and a party about which nobody knows anything at all, which campaigns not on policies, which it reveals, but on wet, soppy slogans about compassion and about how, gosh, you're in trouble with your mortgage, we can solve that. But you know absolutely nothing about this party at all. And I know a little bit because I've done some work on it, and I can tell you that from its own point of view, it's almost certainly going to be the most left-wing government this country has ever had. And it is led by a man whose past is so extraordinarily left-wing and so peculiar that when I tell people what it was and is, they won't believe me. But the reason why they don't tell you what they're going to do is because they know that if they told you what they were going to do, you wouldn't vote for them.
Do what you can to prevent a victory by Starmer's Labour Party. That would be my absolute rule.
So won't that mean for a lot of people voting for the Tory party?
No, it doesn't mean voting for anybody. I think people have to master the fact that in this country now, where we have not for many years been presented with parties which have any interest in what we think or feel, you must learn to vote against. And often in voting against, you'll find yourself giving your vote to a party you might well despise, as I despise the Conservatives.
Whatever I do now, what I know is this: I do not propose to wake up on the morning of July the 5th if everybody else in the country is foolish enough to ignore what I say and put in power this disastrous Labour government, which everybody seems to be rushing to do. I cannot be accused of not having done every ounce of work that I could possibly do in trying to persuade people to avoid this disastrous national, political and social mistake.
My simple, absolutely incredibly simple rule is vote against Starmer and his party, whatever the arrangement is, if you can, if you live in a constituency where your vote counts.
My worry about him is quite different. My worry about him is that an awful lot of people are going to vote for him, or rather for his party, in a sort of trance. And they will then discover that what they've done is that they haven't got Nigel Farage in any position of prominence. They've got Kier Starmer in Downing Street, which wasn't what they meant at all.
It seems Peter Hitchens was right again about this government. He tried to warn us. He said voting is about what you don't want. And rather than voting for a party you do want in power, vote against a party you don't want in power. We voted Labour in, certain they couldn't be any worse than the Tories. We were wrong. We were so desperate to get the Conservatives out, we have opened the door to something far, far worse. And Peter Hitchens had a great point. I voted Reform, and now it was a wasted vote. It's brilliant they got 5 MPs in, but in how many other constituencies did they come second? By separating the right-wing vote in those constituencies, it gave Labour a massive majority. In areas where there was a right-wing Tory MP, it may have been prudent to all vote for them just to limit Labour's power. All the lefties are saying Starmer is boring and more of the same. Hitchens knew otherwise. He follows politics meticulously, and he knew from the beginning that Starmer has been a hardcore authoritarian that is very ideologically driven. And he knew we were getting an authoritarian government that will be incredibly radical. He predicts under Starmer's government, untold damage will be done to Britain. Looks like he is going to be right. And now we have this government for 5 years at the very least, wielding almost total power. This is Hitchens telling us just how damaging Starmer and his government will turn out to be.
People with no savings. That is to say, anybody with savings can absolutely be guaranteed to be stung by very heavy taxation by this Labour government. These are things we know. The other things we know are about the constitutional changes, which are set out by Gordon Brown and announced at a meeting with Gordon Brown and Kier Starmer in December 2022, which would effectively make it impossible for any future government, Reform, Tories, Lib Dems, anyone you care to name, impossible for them to reverse the changes which Labour proposed to make, which will be the completion, in my view, of the constitutional, economic, cultural, social and moral revolutions begun and unfinished by the Blair government between 1997 and 2010.
What do you think Starmer's stance is going to be on immigration? Because he's alluded to the fact that he wants to tackle illegal immigration. Or do you think it's going to be very much an open border policy?
I think it's a subject which is in some ways largely over. I mean, mass immigration has happened in this country, and irreversibly, and a lot of the problems which we face now are going to have to be with how, as civilized people, we cope with it. I don't think he has any particular policy, and I think any attempts to get him to set one out have failed because he doesn't. I don't think he has in his deep heart's core any particular objection to large-scale immigration. He probably realizes as a political issue, it is possibly one of the things most dangerous to his party in the long term. But I don't think he really has one. When he talks about, and Starmer, it's been said by clever people, not by me, but it's true, that Starmer approaches every problem as a lawyer. He tries to prosecute it out of existence. And when he makes these speeches about how he's going to have these special squads and prosecutors, he's going to catch the people smugglers, I think he genuinely believes that he can do something by that method. But I don't think he has any profound idea, because I don't think he really knows what to do any more than the Tories have known what to do.
Now, you seem, normally, you're leading the charge of despair against the Conservatives, but you seem to be more worried about Keir Starmer's Labour Party than almost Jeremy Corbyn's.
So if you want to have a quick chorus, if you hate the Tory party, clap your hands. I'll cheerfully lead it or join in. I still loathe the Tory party. But there are moments when you want to have it destroyed and thrown in the bin and carted away, and moments when actually it might be sensible to hang on. This is one of those moments. The Starmer Labour Party is very similar in character to the Blair Labour Party of 1997. You can tell just by looking at it that it has an enormous amount of menacing things in its mind to do.
Such as?
You don't know what they are. Because, well, look, think three things that the Blair government did within pretty much weeks of coming to office. Bank of England independence, the colossal raid on the pension funds, and the appointment of Alistair Campbell and Jonathan Powell to give orders to civil servants in breach of the Constitution.
What do you think if Starmer wins? What do you think are the first things that he is going to try and do when he gets in? What do you think is going to be the main targets?
Here's the thing we cannot know. In 1997, nobody knew, for instance, that Gordon Brown would abolish the government control over the Bank of England and make it independent. It was an amazing, and in my view, extremely bad development. Nobody knew that he was going to make this tremendous raid upon private pension funds. And nobody knew that there was going to be the constitutional putsch which placed Alistair Campbell and Jonathan Powell in charge of civil servants, although they were not in any way responsible to any Chamber of Parliament. An astonishing development, which was considered outrageous at the time. None of these things were in the manifesto.
And what makes you...
So I don't know what they might do, but I don't think any of them will be nice.
The destruction of British society, really?
Yeah, civil society, yes. Of course. Well, the Blairites did a lot of that anyway. Look how almost none of the professions, almost none of the institutions remains independent. And the real triumph, the stealth triumph of their transformation of the courts and the legal system is astounding. Hardly anybody's even heard of the Judicial Appointments Commission, which revolutionized the appointments to the judges' bench. Very few people understand the nature and extent of the powers of the Supreme Court. These are gigantic changes, but because they bore people, as most serious left-wing change does, because they bore people, they can't bother to concentrate on them or think about them. And there simply hasn't been in British conservatism any intellect capable of understanding what they're up against for a very long time.